Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess whose beauty was renowned throughout the entire kingdom. She enchanted everyone with her grace, and her every glance held a special magic that captivated every heart. But one day, fate changed her path. In a single moment, her entire life was transformed. By the will of Allah, she was suddenly turned into a deer. This raises the question, why did Allah change her into a deer? Was it simply a test, or was there a deeper meaning behind it? What lay hidden in the princess's fate that she had to bear such a transformation? What truth is concealed behind this strange story? Would she manage to change back into her original form, or would she be helpless before the will of fate? Every moment of this story will leave you in awe. To uncover the mystery, be sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel so you too can be part of this extraordinary journey. The story goes that there was a wise and just king who had an only daughter. The city rejoiced when the princess was born, as her arrival brought joy to the entire kingdom. The princess was only 5 years old when her mother fell seriously ill. Her illness grew rapidly worse, and she soon passed away. The king, devastated by his wife's death, was so deeply sorrowful that he couldn't eat or drink for several days. After many days of mourning, the king decided that he should remarry to find some peace and relief from his grief. His advisor also recommended that the king marry again, thinking it would bring tranquility to the royal family. Several months later, the king married again, but his new wife, who became the stepmother of the Princess Aman, never showed any affection toward her. When Ayman was 6 years old, the king's new wife made a decision that would change everything. The queen had no kindness in her heart, and she began treating Ayman harshly. In just a few days, Aman's once vibrant face, like a blooming flower, began to wither. The queen, who had secretly learned some dark magic from a sorcerer, knew how to turn people into animals. One day the queen thought to herself, "I will turn Ayman into a deer. That way, neither she nor the king will love her any more." One morning, the queen woke up early and quietly went to Aman's room while the servants were still asleep. In her hands, she held a silver bowl with a small amount of water. She recited magical incantations and blew on the water. Then, she went to Aman's bed and woke her up. Aman, still half asleep, got up and respectfully greeted the queen. She stood gracefully before her. Without warning, the queen sprinkled the enchanted water on Aman. In that instant, Ayman was transformed into a deer. She was startled and frightened, her mind in a state of confusion. The deer began to run around, her cries of distress echoing throughout the palace. The noise woke the servants from their sleep. Before the queen could settle back into her room, 2 maidservants hurried in, panic written on their faces. "Your Highness, the princess has gone missing," they exclaimed. The queen feigned ignorance and asked, "What do you mean? The princess is missing." She then pretended to be angry and ordered, "Search for her at once, or you will face severe punishment." The maidservants trembled in fear. They searched every corner of the palace, and the servants also scoured the grounds, but they couldn't find the princess. Exhausted, the maidservants returned to the queen and said, "Your Highness, we searched everywhere, but we couldn't find any trace of the princess. However, there is a deer in her room that refuses to leave. We tried to remove it, but it won't go." The queen, pretending to be troubled, replied, "It must be the deer. Lock it in a cage, and I will inform the king." She called for the king, and when he arrived, she said, feigning concern, "Your Majesty, "The princess has been missing since this morning. I searched everywhere inside and outside the palace, but I couldn't find her. There is, however, a strange deer in her room, and it refuses to leave. It seems this deer is responsible for her disappearance." The king, deeply troubled by the sudden disappearance of his beloved daughter, was unsure of what to do. He quickly summoned his court ministers. And as they gathered, the king told them about the princess's disappearance and the strange appearance of the deer in her room. He asked, "What should we do now?" One of the king's ministers, who was very wise, immediately suspected that the new queen had cast a spell, for he knew that she had learned magic and had always harbored a grudge against the princess. However, the minister also realized that it was not the right moment to reveal this information to the king. Instead, he said, "Your Majesty, it is not wise to kill the deer. We should keep a close eye on it and observe its behavior." The king, although distressed, agreed with the minister's advice and decided to wait before taking any drastic action. Meanwhile, the queen, who had successfully transformed the princess into a deer, remained oblivious to the suspicion growing around her. Days passed, and the deer remained locked in the cage, but the ministers, aware of the queen's actions, began quietly investigating her background and her connection to the magic. The mystery of the princess's disappearance and the strange appearance of the deer began to unravel, and the king grew increasingly suspicious of his new queen. Could it be that the queen was the one responsible for this strange transformation? Would the truth ever come to light? Only time would tell. The king ordered his soldiers to ride out in search of the princess. He said that simply sending soldiers wouldn't be enough, and therefore he instructed that an official announcement be made in all the newspapers, declaring that anyone who could find the princess would be rewarded with half the kingdom. The proclamation was made that very day, and many brave and daring young men set off in search of the princess, hoping to find her and claim the reward. The search for the princess began in earnest, and as days passed, the king would come to see the deer every morning. Each time he entered the room, the deer would look at him, and if he was happy, the deer would appear joyous too. If he left, the deer would seem sad. Over time, the king became quite fond of the deer. He even began feeding it himself, and slowly he started to care for it deeply. However, the queen was displeased by the king's affection for the deer. The more he cared for it, the more her hatred for the deer grew. She had already planned to get rid of it, and now she decided to punish it, hoping it would eventually reveal the whereabouts of the princess. One morning, she ordered the deer to fetch water from the well. "Go to the well and bring back 10 pots of water. If you come back empty-handed, you shall not live," she said cruelly. The deer, already suffering from the queen's harshness, felt hopeless. Thinking she could no longer bear the mistreatment, she decided to end her misery. "I will drown myself in the well," she thought. As she jumped into the well, there happened to be a frog swimming in it. But this was no ordinary frog. It was the son of a mighty jinn who had the power to shapeshift. The jinn's son, disguised as a frog, was very wise and had learned many magical arts from his parents. When he saw the deer fall into the well, he immediately recognized her and understood that she was no ordinary animal. Using his magical powers, he lifted her from the well and took her back to his home. The jinn and his wife were delighted to see the deer. The jinn's wife ordered a bowl of water, into which she recited an incantation. She blew on the water, and sprinkled it over the deer. The moment the water touched the deer's body, she transformed back into the beautiful princess, Amun. The princess, now restored to her human form, stood up, radiant as ever, with her beauty shining even brighter than before. Amun immediately greeted the jinn's wife with respect and gratitude. The jinn's wife, struck by the princess's beauty and grace, was filled with joy. She welcomed Amun into her home as her daughter, as per the customs of their family. She promised to take care of Amun and treat her as her own child. The jinn's son, who had also returned to his true form, was overjoyed to see the princess. "Since my mother has adopted you as her daughter, I now consider you my sister," he said warmly. Amun, grateful for their kindness, shared her entire story with them. When the jinn's son heard about the queen's cruelty and the way she had transformed Amun into a deer, he was enraged. "I will go and punish the queen for her wickedness," he declared, his anger clear in his voice. But Amun stopped him, saying, "Do not take revenge for me. Allah punishes the wicked in his own time, and there is no need for us to hasten it. Let her be, and one day she will face the consequences of her actions." Amun, with great wisdom, urged the jinn's son to let her go back to the palace. She promised that she would return when the time was right, but for now, she needed to face her fate. Reluctantly, the jinn's son agreed. He used his magical powers to fill 10 pots with water and sent them back to the palace. Amun, in her form as the deer, went to the well to collect the water. The queen, seeing the filled pots, became furious. "I told you this deer is no ordinary creature. Look at this. She has brought 10 full pots of water," she screamed. The king, who had been watching all of this, now believed that the deer was indeed a powerful sorceress. His suspicions grew, and he became convinced that the deer was somehow involved in the disappearance of his daughter. He now wanted to kill the deer to end the mystery. However, the wise minister intervened, advising him not to act in haste. If the deer is killed, the princess may never be found. But if the deer stays alive, it might one day reveal the princess's whereabouts, the minister said. The king listened to the minister and agreed to spare the deer. Meanwhile, the queen, still furious, continued to send the deer to fetch water. Every day, the jinn's son would help Amun, in her deer form, carry the filled pots of water. After each task, Amun would return to the jinn's home, where she was treated with kindness and care. The queen's jealousy only grew as she saw the king's growing fondness for the deer. She continued to plot, hoping to break the deer's spirit and force her to reveal the princess's location. Days passed, and still the princess remained lost to the king. But the search for her continued, and each day brought the kingdom closer to discovering the truth. The queen's cruelty was slowly being exposed, but would the princess ever return to the palace? Would justice be served, or would the wicked queen's evil deeds prevail? The princess was now enjoying her life. She ate well, relished sweets, played in the garden, swung on swings, and even fetched water. The deer was happy, spending her time with joy and ease. The queen, however, began to grow suspicious. She noticed that the deer never seemed to eat or drink, but was always playing and having fun. She couldn't understand the reason behind it, so she decided to call her magic teacher. The wizard arrived and listened to the queen's concerns. After hearing everything, he promised, "I will soon find out what is happening and let you know." The next day, the deer went to fetch water again, and the wizard followed her. He watched as she fell into the well and he bent over the edge to peek inside. He saw that a frog was leading the deer. The wizard, being very clever, jumped into the well behind the frog, following it to its home. He hid behind the trees and watched everything. When the princess was ready to leave, the wizard hurried out of his hiding place, ran back to the queen, and revealed everything he had seen. He described in detail the garden, the palace, the rooms, and the strange things inside the house, making the queen very eager to visit. She thought, "I will go there, and with the help of the jinn, I will put an end to the princess once and for all." The next day, when the king went out hunting, the queen turned to the wizard and said, "Make me into a deer. When I return, turn me back into a human. Once I succeed in my mission, I will reward you handsomely." The wizard agreed and performed some magic. He sprinkled water on the queen, and she immediately transformed into a deer. She didn't send the princess deer to fetch water. Instead, she herself went to the well. There, she saw a frog swimming. Without hesitation, she jumped into the well, thinking the frog was her brother. The frog, realizing it was the queen in the form of a deer, led her home. When the queen arrived, the jinn's wife, as usual, transformed the deer back into a human. However, as she looked at the queen, she was startled. "This is not my daughter," she exclaimed. "Who are you? And why is my daughter, the princess, not here?" The queen replied, "The girl you adopted is very wicked. I turned her into a deer as punishment. I have heard that you have shown great kindness to her, but be warned, such a cruel girl is not worth your affection. I, on the other hand, am willing to be your daughter. I am the wife of the king, and I will make sure you are rewarded greatly." Upon hearing this, the jinn's wife grew angry. The jinn's son also became furious. The jinn himself was so enraged that he almost devoured the queen right there. However, after some thought, the jinn's wife decided to handle the matter differently. She commanded her servants to tie the queen to a tree and called for the executioner to whip her. "She has done great harm to my daughter, and now she has the audacity to come here and ask for forgiveness. She must pay for her misdeeds," the jinn's wife declared. The servants immediately tied the queen to a tree, and the executioner appeared. His terrifying appearance made the queen scream in fear. She begged, "Please, let me go. I promise I will bring the princess back to her true form, and will never commit any cruelty again." The jinn's wife responded, "You may be freed on one condition. You must go back and gather the king, the ministers, the noblemen, and the people. In front of them, you will confess everything in your own words. You will tell them how you tricked everyone and turned the princess into a deer. Then you will reveal the princess's true identity. We will be watching you, but you will not see us. If you do anything against our wishes, we will immediately punish you with more whippings, and you will be given only 2 dry loaves of bread and 2 glasses of salty water to drink every day. You will also have to grind 20 measures of grain every day." The queen, terrified at the thought of such a harsh punishment, had no choice but to agree. She reluctantly accepted the condition. The jinn's wife turned her back into a deer, and with great difficulty, the queen made her way to the palace. Upon arriving, the wizard turned her back into a human. She sat down in her room, exhausted and deep in thought. A wicked idea crossed her mind. What if I don't follow through with their conditions? What can they do to me? But just then, she saw the jinn's wife and her son standing there, glaring at her with fierce looks. The jinn's wife said, "There is no escape for you now. Call the king and order a court session. We will remain hidden, but if you fail to do as we say, we will take action immediately." Terrified, the queen reluctantly called for the king. She announced, "I know where the princess is, and I can bring her back." The next day, the king was so overjoyed by the news that he immediately called for a grand court session. The news of Princess Amun's return spread across the kingdom, and everyone felt immense joy. The people, who had dearly missed the princess since her disappearance, began celebrating in every home. Hearing about the princess's return felt like a festival to the entire kingdom. On the following day, the court was packed to its capacity. There was hardly enough space to move, as everyone was eager to see the moment they had all been waiting for. The queen, with a sense of guilt in her heart, entered the court, her head lowered, just as a thief might enter a courtroom. She had instructed her servants to bring forward the cage where the deer, the princess, was kept. The queen, in her desperation, hoped to find a way to manipulate the situation again. But as she looked at the jinn family, who were standing in the court, she knew her plans were futile. In a nervous voice, the queen began speaking, confessing all her wrongdoings. She admitted to everything she had done, and then recited incantations that made the deer, the princess, transform back into her true form. As soon as the transformation took place, the entire court shouted in unison, "Long live Princess Amun!" The voice echoed throughout the room, and the excitement of the moment filled the air. Upon hearing the queen's confession, the king's face turned bright red with anger. His voice rang out through the court, "Is there anyone here who can take revenge for the wrongs done by this woman?" At that moment, the jinn, his wife, and their son appeared before the king. One of them spoke, "We are here to assist you." They immediately ordered water to be brought and recited a special incantation. As the water was sprinkled on the queen, she began to writhe in agony and immediately turned into a goat. Princess Amun, who had been watching this transformation with astonishment, approached her stepmother, tears in her eyes. She said, "Mother, what have you done? I have forgiven everything you did to me. Please, return to your true form." The jinn's wife, who had been assisting them all along, turned toward Princess Amun and said, "Dear, your stepmother fully deserves this punishment. However, your love and forgiveness have changed her fate. She will remain in the form of a goat for 3 years. During this time, she will learn the value of truth and humanity. After 3 years, she will be able to return to her human form." Princess Amun, whose heart was full of love and compassion, responded, "If she will return to her true form after 3 years, I will continue praying for her. Whatever wrongs she did, I have already forgiven her, and I will pray that she finds redemption." The jinn's wife smiled and nodded. "Your love is powerful, and with your prayers she will return to her true form. But she must live as a goat for 3 years first." During those 3 years, Princess Amun never once let go of her forgiveness. She kept praying for her stepmother, hoping that she would change. She never let hatred take root in her heart. One day, after the 3 years had passed, the jinn's wife came to Princess Amun and said, "Your stepmother has returned to her human form. She can now appear before you," the jinn's wife said. Princess Amun was filled with anxiety, but she quickly regained her composure. She approached her father, the king, and said, "Father, everything that has happened is before you. My stepmother has paid for her wrongdoings, and now she has been given another chance. What is your decision now?" After a long moment of silence, the king walked over to the queen and embraced her. He said, "Despite your wrongdoings, my love for you has never diminished. You have paid the price for your actions, and now I forgive you." The queen, with tears in her eyes, turned to Princess Aemon and said, "My dear, I needed time to face the truth. Your love and forgiveness have shown me the path of redemption. I bow before you in gratitude." Princess Aemon, feeling compassion for her, hugged her stepmother and said, "Mother, I am happy that you have acknowledged your mistakes. I am proud of you for embracing the path of love and truth. I will always be there for you." The king, the princess, and the queen all began a new chapter of their lives. They started to live together in peace and harmony. Their journey was one of learning, healing, and rediscovering love and compassion. The entire kingdom looked up to the royal family as a beacon of forgiveness and unity. Princess Aemon's story became a legend throughout the kingdom. It taught everyone that love and forgiveness are far more powerful than hatred and revenge. The princess showed that true strength lies in forgiving others, even when they have wronged us. Her willingness to forgive and her deep love for her stepmother transformed the entire kingdom. The king, princess, and queen lived together for many years, and they ruled with wisdom, kindness, and justice. The people of the kingdom learned from their example, and the kingdom flourished. The story of Princess Aemon and her stepmother spread far and wide, reminding everyone of the power of love, redemption, and forgiveness. The kingdom remained peaceful, and the royal family's legacy lived on for generations. Their story became a source of inspiration for all who believed in the strength of love, kindness, and second chances. It was a reminder that no matter the mistakes we make, we all have the power to change and become better, especially when love and forgiveness are at the heart of everything.